In a world where ancient crafts are dying and traditional skills fade into memory, two unlikely champions emerged from the highest corridors of power. When King Charles III and Queen Camilla stepped into a small exhibition hall in London, they weren't just attending another royal duty. They were about to witness something extraordinary, a living testament to human creativity that bridges continents, connects cultures, and proves that sometimes the most beautiful things rise from the most challenging circumstances. This isn't just another royal appearance or ceremonial ribbon cutting. This is the story of how a vision born in the mountains of Afghanistan became a beacon of hope, how traditional craftsmanship found new life in a modern world, and how two people who understand the weight of tradition used their influence to celebrate something truly magical. The Turquoise Mountain exhibition wasn't just displaying art, it was showcasing the power of human resilience, the beauty of cultural preservation, and the unexpected ways that royalty can champion causes that matter. What makes this story even more compelling is that it represents everything King Charles has stood for throughout his life: sustainability, traditional crafts, cultural preservation, and supporting communities in need. When he and Queen Camilla walked through those exhibition doors, they weren't just looking at beautiful objects. They were witnessing the fruits of a dream that began in war-torn Afghanistan and bloomed into something that would inspire people across the globe. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of London as King Charles III adjusted his perfectly tailored suit jacket. Today was different from the countless royal engagements he had attended over the decades. Today, he and Queen Camilla would be celebrating something that touched the very core of his beliefs and passions. The Turquoise Mountain exhibition wasn't just another cultural event on their packed calendar. It represented the culmination of years of dedicated work to preserve traditional craftsmanship and support communities that had faced unimaginable challenges. Queen Camilla checked her appearance one final time in the mirror of their official car. Her elegant dress was chosen specifically for this occasion. Its deep blue hue a subtle nod to the significance of the Turquoise Mountain organization. She had been following the work of this remarkable initiative for years, watching with growing admiration as it transformed lives and preserved ancient skills that were on the verge of disappearing forever. The stories she had heard about the craftspeople whose work they would see today had moved her deeply. These were people who had taken traditional skills passed down through generations and found ways to make them relevant and valuable in today's world. As their motorcade made its way through the bustling streets of London, both Charles and Camilla reflected on how they had first learned about Turquoise Mountain. It had been several years ago when Rory Stewart, the organization's founder, had presented the ambitious vision of reviving traditional crafts in Afghanistan. The idea seemed almost impossible at first. How could beautiful, intricate craftsmanship flourish in a region torn apart by conflict and instability? Yet Stewart's passion and determination were infectious, and his deep understanding of both the cultural significance of these crafts and the practical challenges faced by the artisans made it clear that this wasn't just an idealistic dream. It was a carefully planned initiative that could genuinely make a difference in people's lives. The king had been immediately drawn to the project. Throughout his life, he had been a passionate advocate for traditional skills and sustainable practices. He had seen firsthand how industrialization and mass production had gradually eroded the knowledge and techniques that had been refined over centuries. In his own efforts to promote organic farming, sustainable architecture, and traditional British crafts, he had learned that preserving these skills wasn't just about maintaining cultural heritage. It was about maintaining a connection to quality, authenticity, and the kind of human creativity that couldn't be replicated by machines. When Charles learned about the specific crafts that Turquoise Mountain was working to preserve, his excitement was palpable. Woodworking, jewelry making, calligraphy, miniature painting, and ceramics. These weren't just art forms. They were living links to centuries of cultural tradition. The fact that these skills were being practiced in Afghanistan, a country that had endured so much suffering, made their preservation even more meaningful. These crafts represented hope, continuity, and the indomitable human spirit that refuses to be crushed even in the most difficult circumstances. Queen Camilla had approached the Turquoise Mountain story from a different angle but with equal enthusiasm. Her interest had been sparked by the stories of individual artisans, particularly the women who had found new opportunities and independence through their involvement in the program. She had read about mothers who were now able to support their families through their artistic skills, young people who had discovered talents they never knew they possessed, and elderly craftspeople who had feared their knowledge would die with them but now had eager students to carry on their traditions. The human stories behind Turquoise Mountain were what made it so compelling. This wasn't just about preserving old techniques for academic or museum purposes, it was about creating real economic opportunities for people who had few other options. The organization had developed markets for these traditional crafts, connecting Afghan artisans with collectors and enthusiasts around the world, who appreciated the beauty and authenticity of handmade items. In a world increasingly dominated by mass-produced goods, there was something deeply satisfying about owning something that had been crafted by human hands, using techniques passed down through generations. As they approached the exhibition venue, both Charles and Camilla were thinking about the broader implications of what they were about to see. The Turquoise Mountain exhibition represented more than just beautiful objects displayed in glass cases. It was a statement about the importance of cultural preservation in an increasingly globalized world. It was proof that traditional skills could be economically viable in the modern economy. Most importantly, it was a demonstration that even in the most challenging circumstances, human creativity and determination could flourish. The venue itself had been carefully chosen to reflect the significance of the occasion. The exhibition space was elegant but not ostentatious, allowing the crafted objects to speak for themselves without being overshadowed by elaborate surroundings. The organizers had worked closely with Turquoise Mountain to ensure that the display would tell the complete story, not just showing the finished products, but explaining the techniques, the cultural significance, and the personal stories of the artisans who had created them. Security teams had been coordinating for weeks to ensure that the royal visit would go smoothly. But this wasn't the kind of high-tension security operation that surrounded some royal engagements. The atmosphere was one of celebration and cultural appreciation rather than political significance. The people who would be meeting the king and queen today were artists, craftspeople, and cultural enthusiasts who were genuinely excited to share their passion for traditional skills and cultural preservation. As the royal car pulled up to the exhibition entrance, a small crowd of invited guests and media representatives waited respectfully. Among them were representatives from Turquoise Mountain, including some of the artisans whose work was featured in the exhibition. For these craftspeople, many of whom had never imagined they would meet British royalty, this was a momentous occasion. Their work, which had grown out of ancient traditions practiced in the mountains of Afghanistan, was now being celebrated in one of the world's great cultural centres. Rory Stewart stood near the entrance, clearly excited but also nervous about the significance of the moment. He had worked tirelessly to build Turquoise Mountain from an ambitious idea into a successful organization that was genuinely making a difference in people's lives. Having the King and Queen attend this exhibition represented not just recognition of the organization's work, but validation of the entire approach of supporting traditional crafts as a form of cultural and economic development. The doors of the royal car opened, and King Charles emerged first, his practiced smile immediately putting everyone at ease. He had that rare ability to make formal occasions feel personal and genuine. Queen Camilla followed, her warmth and natural grace immediately apparent to everyone present. Together, they represented not just the British monarchy, but a commitment to supporting causes that might not always receive widespread attention, but were nonetheless vital to cultural preservation and human development. As they were greeted by the exhibition organizers, both Charles and Camilla expressed their genuine excitement about what they were about to see. This wasn't the polite enthusiasm that sometimes characterizes royal engagements. Their interest was clearly authentic, based on years of following Turquoise Mountain's work and a deep personal commitment to the values the organization represented. The first glimpse of the exhibition space revealed carefully arranged displays that immediately captured the eye. Intricate wooden items showed the extraordinary skill of Afghan woodworkers, who had maintained their techniques despite decades of disruption. Delicate jewelry pieces demonstrated the precision and artistry of metalworkers, who created beauty from raw materials, using tools and methods that hadn't changed for centuries. Calligraphy samples showed the flowing elegance of a written art form that connected contemporary Afghanistan to its rich literary and scholarly traditions. But what made this exhibition truly special wasn't just the beauty of the individual pieces, it was the story they told collectively, about human resilience, cultural continuity, and the power of traditional skills to create both beauty and economic opportunity. As Charles and Camilla prepared to begin their tour of the exhibition, they knew they were about to witness something that would reinforce their belief in the importance of supporting initiatives that preserve cultural heritage while creating practical benefits for the people involved. The stage was set for an afternoon that would celebrate not just beautiful craftsmanship, but the broader values of cultural preservation, international cooperation, and the belief that traditional skills have an important place in the modern world. As they stepped into the exhibition space, surrounded by the fruits of centuries-old traditions kept alive by contemporary dedication and skill, both the King and Queen felt the profound significance of what they were about to experience. The moment King Charles and Queen Camilla stepped into the main exhibition hall, they were transported into a world where centuries-old traditions came alive through the skilled hands of contemporary artisans. The carefully curated space buzzed with quiet energy, as the royal couple began their journey through displays that told stories of resilience, creativity, and cultural preservation. Each section of the exhibition had been thoughtfully arranged to showcase not just the finished products, but the entire process behind traditional Afghan craftsmanship. Their first stop was the woodworking section, where intricately carved pieces demonstrated the extraordinary skill of Afghan woodworkers. King Charles, who had always appreciated fine craftsmanship, immediately gravitated toward a stunning wooden chest adorned with geometric patterns that seemed to dance across its surface. The piece had been created by Ustad Mohammed, a master craftsman who had learned his skills from his grandfather and had continued working even during the most difficult periods in Afghanistan's recent history. Rory Stewart, who was personally guiding the tour, explained how Mohammed had initially struggled to find materials and tools after years of conflict had disrupted traditional supply chains. The Turquoise Mountain program had helped him reconnect with suppliers and access quality wood that allowed his skills to flourish once again. What made Mohammed's story particularly compelling was how he had adapted traditional techniques to create pieces that appealed to contemporary tastes while maintaining the authentic character of Afghan woodworking. Queen Camilla was fascinated by the intricate details of the carving work. She asked detailed questions about the tools used, the time required to complete such pieces, and the significance of the various patterns and motifs. Her genuine interest clearly delighted the representatives from Turquoise Mountain, who were accustomed to explaining their work to people who appreciated it intellectually, but didn't always grasp the emotional and cultural depth behind each piece. As they moved through the woodworking displays, both Charles and Camilla were struck by the diversity of items that had been created. There were small decorative boxes suitable for jewelry or keepsakes, larger furniture pieces that could serve as statement items in contemporary homes, and architectural elements that showed how traditional Afghan woodworking could be incorporated into modern construction projects. Each piece represented not just artistic skill, but economic opportunity for the craftspeople who created them. The next section showcased the jewelry and metalworking traditions that had been preserved and revitalized through Turquoise Mountain's efforts. Here, the royal couple encountered pieces that demonstrated the extraordinary precision and artistry of Afghan metalworkers. Delicate silver bracelets featured intricate engravings that required both steady hands and deep knowledge of traditional motifs. Pendant necklaces incorporated semi-precious stones that had been carefully selected and set using techniques that had been passed down through generations. One particular piece caught Queen Camilla's attention immediately. It was a silver and turquoise necklace created by Fatima, a young woman who had learned metalworking skills through the Turquoise Mountain program. Fatima's story was particularly inspiring because she had started with no previous experience in jewelry making but had shown such natural talent and dedication that she had quickly become one of the program's most accomplished students. The necklace itself was a masterpiece of traditional Afghan jewelry design, but what made it even more special was the story behind its creation. Fatima had incorporated elements that honored her grandmother's memory while adding her own creative touches that reflected her contemporary perspective. The piece represented the perfect balance between respecting traditional techniques and allowing for personal artistic expression. As Rory Stewart shared Fatima's story, both Charles and Camilla were visibly moved. Here was a young woman who had discovered not just a skill but a pathway to economic independence and artistic fulfillment. The jewelry she created wasn't just beautiful. It was meaningful both to her as the creator and to the customers who would eventually own and treasure these pieces. The metalworking section also featured larger items, including decorative plates and serving pieces that showcased the range of skills possessed by Afghan craftspeople. These items demonstrated how traditional techniques could be applied to create functional objects that would be prized in contemporary homes. The combination of beauty and utility made these pieces particularly appealing to modern consumers who valued both aesthetics and practicality. Moving on to the calligraphy section, the royal couple encountered an art form that connected contemporary Afghanistan to its rich literary and scholarly traditions. The examples on display showed various styles of Arabic and Persian calligraphy, each requiring years of study and practice to master. The flowing, elegant lines of the text seemed to dance across specially prepared paper, creating visual compositions that were as beautiful as they were meaningful. King Charles, who had always appreciated the connection between visual art and written expression, spent considerable time examining the calligraphy examples. He was particularly interested in learning about the different styles and their historical significance. The calligraphers working with Turquoise Mountain had not only preserved these traditional forms, but had found ways to make them relevant to contemporary audiences. One display showed how traditional calligraphy techniques were being used to create modern art pieces that could appeal to international collectors. These weren't just reproductions of classical texts but original compositions that used traditional techniques to express contemporary thoughts and emotions. The fusion of ancient skills with modern sensibilities created pieces that honored the past while speaking to present-day audiences. Queen Camilla was particularly drawn to a piece that incorporated both calligraphy and decorative elements, creating a composition that was both textually meaningful and visually stunning. The artist had used traditional tools and techniques, but had arranged the text and decorative elements in a way that created a modern artistic statement. This piece perfectly illustrated how traditional crafts could evolve and adapt while maintaining their essential character and quality. The miniature painting section provided another window into the extraordinary artistic traditions of Afghanistan. These tiny, detailed paintings required not just artistic skill, but incredible patience and precision. The painters working with Turquoise Mountain had maintained techniques that had been developed over centuries, using traditional pigments and brushes to create works of art that captured entire worlds in spaces no larger than a book page. The subjects of the miniature paintings ranged from traditional scenes of court life and natural landscapes to more contemporary themes that reflected modern Afghan experiences. This range demonstrated how traditional art forms could remain relevant by adapting their subject matter while maintaining their technical excellence and aesthetic principles. Both Charles and Camilla were amazed by the level of detail that the miniature painters could achieve. They examined the tiny brushstrokes that created facial expressions, the careful layering of colors that gave depth to landscapes, and the way that traditional compositional techniques were used to tell complex stories in very small spaces. These weren't just decorative items, they were complete artistic statements that required viewers to slow down and appreciate the extraordinary skill and patience that went into their creation. The ceramics section showcased another dimension of Afghan traditional crafts. Here, the royal couple saw examples of pottery and ceramic decoration that demonstrated both functional skill and artistic vision. Traditional Afghan ceramics combined practical utility with aesthetic beauty, creating items that could serve everyday purposes while also functioning as decorative art pieces. The ceramic pieces on display showed the range of techniques that Afghan potters had mastered. There were simple, elegant bowls that showcased the natural beauty of well-formed clay, and there were more elaborate pieces that featured complex glazing and decorative techniques. Each piece represented hours of careful work, from the initial shaping of the clay through the various stages of decoration and firing. What made the ceramics section particularly interesting was how it showed the connection between traditional crafts and everyday life. These weren't just art objects created for display, they were functional items that could be used and appreciated in contemporary homes. The combination of beauty and utility made these pieces particularly appealing to modern consumers who valued both aesthetics and practicality. As the royal couple moved through each section of the exhibition, they began to understand the full scope of what Turquoise Mountain had accomplished. This wasn't just about preserving old techniques for their historical interest. It was about creating a sustainable economic model that allowed traditional craftspeople to support themselves and their families while maintaining cultural traditions that might otherwise be lost. The human stories behind each piece made the exhibition particularly powerful. These weren't anonymous artifacts. They were the products of specific individuals who had overcome significant challenges to maintain and develop their skills. Each piece represented not just artistic achievement, but personal resilience and cultural pride. Throughout their tour, both Charles and Camilla asked detailed questions about the business model that made Turquoise Mountain sustainable. They were interested in understanding how traditional crafts could compete in global markets and how the organization ensured that the economic benefits reached the craftspeople themselves, rather than being absorbed by middlemen or distributors. The answers they received reinforced their belief that this approach to cultural preservation and economic development was both practical and effective. By creating direct connections between craftspeople and international markets, Turquoise Mountain had developed a model that honored traditional skills, while providing real economic opportunities for the people who possessed them. As King Charles and Queen Camilla reached the final section of the Turquoise Mountain exhibition, the atmosphere became even more intimate and meaningful. This area had been designed as a meeting space where they could interact directly with some of the artisans whose work they had been admiring throughout their visit. The opportunity for personal conversation would transform their understanding of the exhibition, from an appreciation of beautiful objects to a deeper connection with the human stories behind each piece. Waiting to meet them were 3 craftspeople who had traveled from Afghanistan specifically for this occasion. Their presence at the exhibition represented not just their individual achievements, but the broader success of the Turquoise Mountain program in creating opportunities for skilled artisans to share their work with international audiences. For these craftspeople, meeting British royalty was an extraordinary honor, but more importantly, it was an opportunity to share their passion for traditional skills and explain how the program had transformed their lives. The first person they met was Ustad Ahmad, the elderly woodworker, whose intricate geometric patterns had caught King Charles's attention earlier in the tour. Ahmad's weathered hands told the story of decades spent working with wood, and his eyes sparkled with the enthusiasm of someone who had never lost his love for his craft. Through a translator, he explained how he had learned woodworking from his father and grandfather, maintaining skills that had been passed down through his family for generations. Ahmad's story was particularly moving because it illustrated the challenges that traditional craftspeople had faced during Afghanistan's difficult recent history. There had been periods when it was almost impossible to obtain quality materials or find customers who appreciated traditional craftsmanship. Many skilled artisans had been forced to abandon their crafts and find other ways to support their families. Ahmad himself had worked as a laborer for several years, using his skilled hands for basic construction work because there was no market for the beautiful wooden items he was capable of creating. The transformation in Ahmad's circumstances had come when Turquoise Mountain connected him with international customers who appreciated the quality and authenticity of traditional Afghan woodworking. Suddenly, his skills were not just culturally significant, they were economically valuable. He was able to return to the craft he loved while also supporting his family and training younger people in traditional techniques that might otherwise have been lost. King Charles was deeply moved by Ahmad's story. As someone who had spent decades advocating for traditional crafts and sustainable practices, he understood both the cultural and economic importance of what Ahmad represented. The conversation between them, despite the language barrier, was filled with mutual respect and shared understanding of the value of maintaining traditional skills in a modern world. Queen Camilla had an equally meaningful conversation with Mariam, a young woman who had become one of Turquoise Mountain's most accomplished jewelry makers. Mariam's story was different from Ahmad's, because she represented a new generation of craftspeople who were discovering traditional skills rather than inheriting them from family members. Her involvement with jewelry making had begun when she was looking for ways to support her children after becoming widowed at a young age. The Turquoise Mountain program had provided Miriam not just with training in jewelry making techniques, but with a complete support system that helped her develop both her artistic skills and her understanding of business practices. She had learned how to select and work with silver and semi-precious stones, how to incorporate traditional motifs into contemporary designs, and how to price and market her work effectively. What made Mariam's story particularly inspiring was how she had used her success to help other women in similar circumstances. She had become an informal mentor within the Turquoise Mountain program, sharing her knowledge and experience with other women who were looking for ways to achieve economic independence through traditional crafts. Her jewelry pieces were not just beautiful objects, they represented empowerment and opportunity for women who might otherwise have few options for supporting themselves and their families. The third artisan they met was Khalil, a young man who had discovered a passion for calligraphy through the Turquoise Mountain program. Unlike Ahmad, who had learned his skills from family members, Khalil had initially known nothing about traditional calligraphy. His introduction to this art form had come when he was looking for work and heard about opportunities for training in traditional crafts. Khalil's natural talent for calligraphy had quickly become apparent, and he had devoted himself to mastering both the technical aspects of this art form and its cultural and literary significance. Through the program, he had learned not just how to create beautiful written compositions, but how to understand and appreciate the texts he was writing. His work had evolved from simply copying traditional examples to creating original compositions that used classical techniques to express contemporary thoughts and emotions. The conversation with Khalil was particularly meaningful for both Charles and Camilla because it illustrated how traditional arts could serve as bridges between past and present, connecting young people with their cultural heritage while providing them with skills that were relevant in the modern economy. Khalil's calligraphy pieces were being purchased by collectors around the world who appreciated both their technical excellence and their cultural authenticity. As these personal conversations continued, both the king and queen began to understand the full significance of what they were witnessing. The Turquoise Mountain exhibition wasn't just about preserving old traditions for their historical interest. It was about creating a sustainable model for cultural preservation that also provided real economic benefits for the people involved. The program had demonstrated that traditional crafts could be both culturally significant and economically viable in the contemporary global economy. The business model behind Turquoise Mountain was particularly impressive because it addressed many of the challenges that typically face efforts to preserve traditional crafts. Too often, cultural preservation initiatives focus on maintaining techniques and knowledge without creating sustainable economic opportunities for the craftspeople involved. The result is that traditional skills become museum pieces rather than living, evolving practices that can adapt and thrive in changing circumstances. Turquoise Mountain had avoided this trap by creating direct connections between skilled craftspeople and international markets that valued authenticity and quality. The organization had invested in understanding both the traditional techniques and the contemporary market conditions that would allow these crafts to be economically sustainable. They had also provided comprehensive support to craftspeople, helping them not just with technical skills, but with business practices, marketing, and quality control. The success of this approach was evident in the stories of the artisans they had met and in the quality of the work displayed throughout the exhibition. These weren't just preservation efforts. They were thriving businesses that allowed skilled craftspeople to support themselves and their families while maintaining cultural traditions that connected them to centuries of heritage. As the formal tour of the exhibition concluded, King Charles and Queen Camilla participated in a brief ceremony where they were presented with special pieces created specifically for this occasion. The items they received were not just ceremonial gifts but examples of the finest work being produced through the Turquoise Mountain program. Each piece represented the skill and dedication of its creator, while also symbolizing the broader mission of cultural preservation and economic empowerment. The ceremony concluded with remarks from both the King and Queen expressing their admiration for the work they had seen and their support for the broader mission of Turquoise Mountain. King Charles spoke about the importance of maintaining traditional skills in an increasingly mechanized world, emphasizing how craftsmanship represented not just cultural heritage, but a way of working that honored both materials and human creativity. Queen Camilla focused her remarks on the individual stories they had heard, praising the resilience and creativity of the artisans they had met. She emphasized how the program demonstrated that cultural preservation could be a powerful tool for economic development and personal empowerment, particularly for women and young people who might otherwise have limited opportunities. As they prepared to leave the exhibition, both Charles and Camilla reflected on the significance of what they had experienced. The afternoon had reinforced their belief in the importance of supporting initiatives that preserve cultural heritage while creating practical benefits for the people involved. They had seen firsthand how traditional skills could be maintained and developed in ways that honored the past while remaining relevant to the present. The Turquoise Mountain exhibition had also demonstrated the power of international cooperation in addressing complex challenges. The program's success depended on bringing together Afghan craftspeople, British organizational expertise, and global markets in a way that benefited everyone involved. This model of cooperation offered hope for other regions and communities facing similar challenges in preserving their cultural heritage while creating economic opportunities. The impact of the royal visit extended far beyond the immediate participants. Media coverage of the event would introduce Turquoise Mountain to new audiences who might not have been familiar with its work. The royal endorsement would lend credibility and visibility to the program, potentially opening up new opportunities for the craftspeople involved and inspiring similar initiatives in other contexts. For the artisans who had participated in the exhibition, the royal visit represented validation of their skills and recognition of their cultural contributions. The fact that their work had been celebrated at such a high level would provide encouragement for them to continue developing their skills and pride in their cultural heritage. As King Charles and Queen Camilla left the exhibition venue, they carried with them not just the beautiful gifts they had received, but a renewed appreciation for the power of traditional crafts to create both beauty and opportunity. The Turquoise Mountain exhibition had demonstrated that cultural preservation and economic development could work together to create positive change in people's lives. The legacy of this royal visit would continue long after the exhibition ended. The attention it brought to Turquoise Mountain would help sustain and expand the program, creating opportunities for more craftspeople to develop their skills and find markets for their work. The model demonstrated by Turquoise Mountain would inspire similar initiatives in other parts of the world, showing how traditional skills could be preserved and developed in ways that created genuine benefits for the communities involved. Most importantly, the exhibition had shown that in a world often focused on technological advancement and mass production, there remained a place for the kind of beauty and quality that could only be created by skilled human hands working with traditional techniques. The royal celebration of Turquoise Mountain represented a commitment to preserving and honoring these values for future generations.